massive crack that's up to 50 feet deep suddenly opened up in the ground in Africa.
It's several miles long, and some believe it is a sign the continent is splitting in.
A new ocean is being born in Africa, and not in the distant future, but right now. The East African Rift, a giant fissure stretching for miles, is changing the continent before our eyes.
A crack of that magnitude indicates that something is moving in the Earth on a rather large scale.
Some scientists say that this rift could divide Africa into two, creating a new ocean that we could have never imagined.
Excuse me, I'm out of breath actually with excitement at this stage. To think this happened overnight, this is the stuff of Hollywood.
Did you know that in 2005, massive earthquakes shook the Afar region, followed by a volcanic eruption? This is not science fiction. We are witnessing a real and spectacular geological phenomenon. The Earth's crust is stretching. And the most incredible thing is, this process could forever change the map of our planet. In this video, I will take you to explore the birth of an ocean and how the Earth itself is being reformed. Are you ready to see how continents separate? This is not just a natural phenomenon, it is a living story of creation. In September 2005, a series of extraordinary earthquakes shook the remote Afar Depression, located in the heart of the East African Rift. During that week, over 130 earthquakes of various magnitudes left their mark on the Ethiopian ground, sending an urgent message from the Earth itself. Can you imagine being in a place where the ground beneath your feet is constantly shaking, changing the face of the planet? That's exactly what happened that month. Each of these tremors was a real testimony to a unique geological process, tectonic plates stretching, tearing apart and separating, while the Earth's crust weakened in a surprising manner. For the inhabitants of the region, this phenomenon was terrifying. The ground, usually solid, became unpredictable and violent, opening up into enormous cracks that released magma and lava. On the 26th of September, the Dubby volcano erupted, an event that, although less known in the media, was deeply significant. The burning lava tore the ground apart, opening huge fissures, and a column of ash darkened the sky, covering the region with a gray layer. The local communities were forced to abandon their homes and livelihoods, fleeing in search of safety, while destruction reigned in their lives. This was only the beginning of an unprecedented geological phenomenon. Geologists and seismologists quickly arrived in the area to study the events. What did they discover? That what was happening was not an isolated event, but part of a much larger process known as a rift. This phenomenon is separating Africa, and the Afar Depression is one of the most active and visible points of this process in the world. What we saw in 2005 was a direct glimpse into the inner forces of the planet, something we usually only study through centuries of research. The tectonic activity revealed how dynamic and ever-changing our planet is. Although devastating for the local communities, this destruction was also the prelude to a great geological revelation. The African continent is splitting in two, and what happened in 2005 is just the beginning of a transformation that will take millions of years. Although the events of 2005 were tragic for those affected, they also provide us with an invaluable lesson. The planet is in constant change. We are witnessing the evolutionary process of the Earth, which, although terrifying, invites us to reflect on our connection to this incredible planet and how, at any moment, the world as we know it can transform before our eyes. In 2005, something extraordinary began to happen beneath the Rift Valley region in Ethiopia, a place already known for its intense geological activity. But what occurred that year was of such an astounding magnitude that it left scientists speechless, watching as the Earth itself began to reconfigure before their eyes. In the Dabahu region, volcanic activity triggered a radical transformation of the landscape, creating deep fissures that stretched over 37 miles. Imagine this. A piece of land, which seemed solid and stable, suddenly tore apart, revealing the planet's innards. The Earth's internal layers, usually hidden thousands of meters deep, came to the surface, exposing molten rock and thermal activity of an impressive magnitude. In just a few days, an entire section of the land shifted, something that, in geological times, normally takes millions of years. Armed with satellite images and state-of-the-art seismic equipment, scientists witnessed how the Somali and Nubian tectonic plates separated in real time. This wasn't just a geological event, it was like witnessing a cosmic choreography where the invisible forces beneath the surface of the planet pushed the Earth into a new configuration. The tectonic plates, which usually move at an almost imperceptible pace, were now separating before our eyes in a surprisingly rapid manner. Can you imagine being a witness to the birth of an ocean? That's exactly what was happening. Dabahu was not just an erupting volcano. It was a geologic creation show, the prelude to a process that could divide Africa in two and give rise to a new ocean. We were witnessing the future of the Earth, a future in which continents separate and oceans emerge, just as they did over 200 million years ago when the continents of the ancient Pangaea began to break apart. The eruption of Dabahu was a historic moment in geological science. For decades, the theory of continental rifting had been debated, but at that precise moment, scientists lived the theory in action. What had previously been considered a hypothetical process was now a palpable reality. This phenomenon, visible in real time, completely changed the way we understand tectonic processes and the geological evolution of the planet. And the most surprising part, what began with a volcanic eruption in 2005 was just the beginning. In the weeks and months that followed, the region continued to be a natural laboratory for an unparalleled geological phenomenon. In the Rift Valley, the Earth is alive. It's not just a place of destruction, but also of creation, where a new geographical story is being written before our eyes. This event is not only altering the physical map of Africa, but it is also rewriting our understanding of the planet we live on. What happened in Afar is a clear reminder that the Earth is never still. It is always changing, evolving, and reforming. In Afar, we are witnessing the creation of a new geological era, and we are observing the birth of a story that will continue to be written for millions of years. Under the vast expanse of East Africa, the Earth never stops moving. The East African Rift, a geological phenomenon that stretches over 3,000 kilometers from the Afar Depression in Ethiopia to Mozambique, is much more than just a simple fracture in the Earth's crust. It is a living story of creation, destruction, and transformation, a process that unfolds before our eyes day after day and reflects some of the deepest forces of nature. This rift is not just a fracture, it is a battlefield where two tectonic plates, the Somali plate, which moves southeast, and the Nubian plate, which moves northwest, separate, generating a geological dance of enormous forces. Magma, the fiery fluid that erupts from the Earth's mantle, infiltrates the rift, pushing the plates apart, creating fissures that tear the visible crust. As the plates separate, the crust stretches, becoming thinner and more vulnerable in a continuous process of rupture and regeneration. What is fascinating about this phenomenon is not only its monumental scale, but also that we can be live witnesses of its evolution. While in other parts of the world, tectonic processes take millions of years, in the East African Rift, transformations are so fast that they can be seen during our own lives. Earthquakes shake the region, fissures emerge, and volcanic eruptions mark the surface of the Earth as if the Earth itself were in a process of simultaneous creation and destruction. Magma plays a crucial role in this process. When it infiltrates the cracks and cools, it generates new crust. This cycle of creation and destruction is reminiscent of what happens at ocean ridges beneath the sea, where magma creates new ocean floors. But the East African Rift is not just magma. Gravity also plays a determining role. As the plates separate, huge sections of the crust sink, creating deep valleys and imposing escarpments. These valleys, some of which fill with water, form the largest lakes in Africa, such as Lake Tanganyika and Lake Malawi. These are not just stunning landscapes, but geological monuments that mark the progress of the plate separation. The lakes are witnesses to the region's geological dynamics, and they are also symbols of the ongoing processes. But this balance will not last forever. Eventually, the rift will fill with water from the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, creating a new ocean that will separate Africa into two land masses. This process could take tens of millions of years, but according to the principles of plate tectonics, it is a certainty. We are witnessing the birth of an ocean. The process we are observing in the East African Rift is just the beginning of a gigantic geological transformation. The fragmentation of the ancient Pangaea, which separated the Atlantic and Indian Oceans, is repeating itself. This time, the protagonist is Africa. The East African Rift is the initial phase of this monumental process where the lands of East Africa are separating and magma is the invisible sculptor that is shaping this new geography. Although the formation of the new ocean is still far off in time, we can already see the first traces of this future in the Afar Depression, where parts of the rift are already below sea level. The sinking of the crust, driven by magma, is a constant process, and satellite data shows that the rift is gradually widening at a rate of a few millimeters per year. This advance, though small on a human scale, is unstoppable and marks the beginning of a geographic transformation that will radically change Africa. As the rift extends, the geographical changes will bring new marine ecosystems. When the new ocean finally forms, there will be new coastlines, new opportunities for life, and new forms of life that we cannot even imagine. However, this future of creation will bring challenges for the communities that depend on the fertile land and lakes of the rift. As the ocean advances, these people could be displaced, and their livelihoods, which have endured for centuries, could be threatened by the forces of nature. Moreover, volcanic activity could intensify, posing a risk to nearby populations, and the disruption of climate patterns could affect agriculture and access to fresh water, essential for life in the region. Despite these challenges, the East African Rift is a reminder of the creativity and dynamism inherent in the Earth. It shows us how the planet, in its unstoppable movement, can transform entire landscapes, creating new forms of life, but also destroying the old. It is an eternal cycle of creation and destruction that is not only studied in geology books, but is also lived and observed in the present. The rift is a portal to the past and future of the Earth, a testament to the interconnection between life and geological forces. By observing it, we not only see how the continents were formed, but also how the forces of nature continue to shape the Earth, 1 millimeter at a time. The slow but unstoppable rhythm of the Earth. Under the surface of East Africa, a deep and silent geological process is unfolding, almost imperceptible. The land, which seems stable at first glance, is changing at such a slow pace that it often seems as if time has stopped. However, what today seems like a subtle transformation is actually the prelude to a radical change that will reshape the region in the next millions of years. In this place, the Nubian and Somali tectonic plates are slowly separating, a phenomenon almost invisible in human terms, but that, with the passage of time, will lead to the creation of a new ocean. This process is not the result of a sudden rupture or a cataclysmic explosion, but of a constant and continuous displacement. At a speed of up to 2 inches per year, the plates slowly move apart, driven by the heat and molten rock that rises from the depths of the Earth's mantle. This magma, an invisible energy emanating from the depths, creates fractures, fissures, and weakens the Earth's crust, making the region stretch and become vulnerable, like a fabric being torn along its seams. Along the East African Rift, This movement produces steep valleys, escarpments, and dramatic cracks that continuously modify the landscape. Although the transformation occurs at a speed beyond our everyday understanding, the impact of this process is monumental, comparable to the birth of oceans throughout Earth's history. In a distant past, similar forces separated the South American continent from the African one, creating the Atlantic Ocean. Now, in the heart of Africa, we can see how that process is happening again, on a scale that is accessible to us, giving us a direct glimpse into the mechanisms that continue to shape our planet. As the plates separate, magma rises to fill the voids created, forming new crust in a continuous cycle of divergence and ascent. This process of creation and destruction will eventually transform the East African Rift into an ocean basin, a space similar to the Red Sea or the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. But this is not a silent change. The tension accumulated beneath the surface is regularly released through earthquakes that shake the land and volcanoes that roar, reminding us of the powerful internal restlessness of the planet. In 2005, the Dabahu event showed how these tensions could manifest in a dramatic way. More than 130 earthquakes in a single week completely altered the landscape, making visible the seismic activity that is normally hidden beneath the surface. The volcanoes in the East African Rift, such as Erta Ale and Oldoinyo Lengai, are not just majestic landscapes but key actors in this process. They erode the crust and accelerate the rupture, adding a new layer of rock with each eruption, sculpting the land with the force of nature itself. Throughout the region, geothermal phenomena continue to surprise. Hot springs, fumaroles, and boiling mud pools are visible signs of the magma lying just below. These landscapes, which seem to come from another world, are manifestations of the geothermal forces shaping the rift. The Afar Depression, located at the northern end of the rift, is a unique place where the cracks in the crust allow magma to mix with underground waters, creating boiling mud lakes and, at times, lava lakes. It is a space where the planet seems to bare itself, showing us its internal process in a way few places on Earth allow us to observe. Over time, as the separation of the plates progresses, water from the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean will flood the rift, forming a new ocean. This phenomenon is not a distant fantasy, but a geological certainty, a window into the future which will happen on timescales far beyond our lifetime. However, during our lifetimes, seismic and volcanic activity will continue to visibly alter the landscape. This change not only has a geological impact, but also affects the people living in the region. For the communities living along the East African Rift, this land is not just a scientific wonder. It is their home, a home that is in constant transformation. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and landscape changes are tangible reminders that the forces shaping the planet also directly affect their lives. These changes, though gradual, demand extraordinary resilience to adapt and survive. And yet, it is impossible not to feel a deep admiration for the slow but unstoppable rhythm of the Earth. Through this process of creation and destruction, we see how the Earth is constantly redefining itself, how it forms and dissolves, how life finds new ways to adapt to these changes. The East African Rift, like a living laboratory, reminds us that our existence is intrinsically connected to this incessant process of change, a process that will continue long after we are gone. Looking to the future, questions arise about how the affected communities will adapt to this constantly changing world. How will they respond to the uncertainty of an environment in constant transformation? What opportunities could arise from this geological evolution? And perhaps most importantly, what lessons can we learn about our relationship with a planet that continues to move, indifferent to the speed with which we live our lives? Under the vast expanse of East Africa, a deep and silent geological process unfolds with the precision of a cosmic clock. The Earth itself, as if obeying an ancient call from planetary forces, begins to slowly separate. In its place, a new ocean is being born, a testament to the unbreakable power of nature and its capacity to reinvent the geography of the planet. This phenomenon is written in the language of tectonic plates. The Somali Plate and the Nubian Plate, two massive fragments of the Earth's crust, move apart with a calm that is difficult to understand at first glance. The journey towards the creation of an ocean begins with the Earth opening into deep fissures. It's as if the continent is breathing, expanding imperceptibly, marking the first stages of a separation that will take millions of years to complete. The first sign of this transformation are the cracks that widen, the emergence of valleys surrounded by imposing cliffs, sculpted by volcanic eruptions and earthquakes that shake the region. These events, which often seem chaotic, are actually the tools of a much larger process, preparing the Earth for a radical reinvention. Over the centuries, these valleys, which were once simple ruptures in the crust, expand and sink, forming what could be the first paths toward the creation of a new ocean. As the crack deepens, some sections of the land begin to descend below sea level. The accumulated pressure, fueled by magma currents rising from the Earth's mantle, begins to forge a new topography. Water from the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, which had until then remained a safe distance away, starts to invade these forming basins, filling the sunken areas and creating shallow gulfs in the heart of the continent. It's a silent transformation, almost imperceptible but fascinating, a testament to the power of the invisible forces acting beneath the Earth's surface. What was once solid land is now becoming a liquid space, a precursor to what will eventually be a new ocean. The magma, which for thousands of years has been pushing and separating the tectonic plates, begins to fill the voids left by the crack, solidifying and creating new oceanic crust. This newly formed seabed is the skeleton of a gestating ocean, an ocean that, in its fullness, will forever change the geography of Africa and the world. The creation of this new ocean is not just a matter of time. It is a matter of patience. Millions of years of slow transformations on a time scale that completely escapes our daily lives. But what today seems like a tranquil and distant process is, in reality, the prelude to a monumental geological upheaval. The future of East Africa is in motion, and the planet, with its tireless rhythm of creation and destruction, shows us how even the biggest changes can arise from the most silent and persistent forces. This geological phenomenon is a perfect illustration of the infinite power of nature, a journey that begins in stillness, in the realm of the invisible, and transforms into one of the grandest manifestations of the Earth, a new ocean, a divided continent, and a world that keeps rewriting its history 1 millimeter at a time. Imagine for a moment that you are looking at the future of the Earth, millions of years from now, when the African continent will no longer be the same. In the heart of East Africa, the East African Rift is carrying out a silent and almost imperceptible transformation. The Earth's crust is slowly separating, as if the Earth is breathing, preparing for something grand, the creation of a new ocean. This geological process, moving millimeter by millimeter, challenges our understanding of time. But scientists predict that in the next 5 to 10 million years, this rift will culminate in a real ocean that will radically change the geography and ecosystems of Africa. Imagine the Somali Plate, today part of Africa, slowly separating, taking with it parts of countries like Ethiopia, Somalia, and Djibouti. What we know today as solid land will, in the near future, become islands surrounded by a vast blue ocean. A planetary scale change that we haven't seen in thousands of years. Does this sound familiar? Something similar happened millions of years ago when Madagascar separated from Africa, creating a unique ecosystem. The new coastlines of countries like Kenya and Tanzania will change forever, with new shores washed by the sea and horizons we never imagined. The landscapes as we know them will transform, giving way to an entirely different coastline, shaped by tectonic activity and the invisible forces that govern our planet. what will happen with life? This change won't just be geological. Life will adapt to these new conditions. Ecosystems will evolve to adjust to this new ocean, and animal and plant species will reconfigure as new islands and coastlines emerge. Human communities will also have to adapt to an environment in constant transformation. They'll be able to witness the creation of an ocean from their shores, a continuous reminder that the Earth is always in motion, renewing itself over time. The East African Rift is not just a fracture in the Earth, it is a testament to the constant planetary evolution, to how nature does not stop but continues creating and destroying again and again. This geological phenomenon reminds us that the future of the Earth, like its past, is always in motion. And though we cannot see it on a human scale, we can witness the history that is unfolding right beneath our feet. In a distant future, the East African Rift will be a geological monument, a memory of how the Earth continued creating new forms of life, new coastlines, and an emerging ocean. And it all began with a seemingly insignificant crack. About 30 million years ago, beneath Africa's arid surface, a silent and majestic rupture began. The Arabian Plate slowly began separating from Africa, giving rise to what we now know as the Red Sea. This geological process, like the one we are witnessing in the East African Rift, was marked by intense volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and a landscape transformed by magma rising from the depths. What began as a disruptive fracture, full of chaos and pressure, eventually created a new body of water in a solid continent. The Red Sea, now one of the richest marine ecosystems, was born from a crack that widened, forming a new ocean floor. But the story of continent separation doesn't end here. Around 200 million years ago, the Great Pangaea, the supercontinent that connected almost all the Earth, began to fragment. From that separation emerged the Atlantic Ocean, a vast ocean that, like the Red Sea, formed through a slow but unstoppable geological process. The continents separated, waters emerged, and new coastlines, seas, and oceans were born, reshaping the planet's geography. What's happening today in the East African Rift is not an isolated event. It is an echo of those ancient processes. The fragmentation of continents and the birth of new oceans not only transform the planet's geography, but also radically alter ecosystems. In the past, this phenomenon gave rise to places like Madagascar, where a unique ecosystem flourished after separating from Africa. This process is repeating itself today, and the new ocean being born in East Africa could give rise to unknown marine ecosystems, such as coral reefs and marine depths we cannot yet imagine. Every time an ocean forms, the marine world experiences an explosion of biodiversity. The separation of continents creates islands and seas that become reservoirs of unique life, just like Madagascar with its endemic flora and fauna. A new ocean in East Africa could be home to new species, adapted to a continuously changing environment. In fact, the emerging marine ecosystems could harbor life never before seen, reconfiguring global biodiversity and creating opportunities to study how life adapts to extreme conditions. This cycle of creation doesn't only affect the marine world. The terrestrial zones will also experience profound changes. The birth of an ocean in East Africa could transform the region's climatic conditions. The dry lands, which are today arid, may become more humid and fertile, offering new hope for agriculture and terrestrial biodiversity. However, as with any change, challenges will also arise. The regions that are currently wet may face droughts, and human communities will have to adapt to an ever-changing environment. What we're seeing in East Africa is not just a geological transformation, it's a lesson in the transformative power of the Earth. The process unfolding before our eyes is a continuation of a cycle that has been occurring for billions of years. In the East African Rift, we are witnessing how the Earth continues to create and destroy, adapting to new realities. Evolution is not just a biological process, it is also geological. And the history we're living in this moment is our history, a history of resilience, adaptation, and continuous change.